Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. We made it, y'all. Week 1 is here. Finally, we can get into something substantial. We can stop with the hypotheticals. We can stop doing 8 million what ifs, and we can just let this 2025 season play out. I can't wait. I'm really excited for tomorrow. It's going to be an awesome week 1 slate. I mean, starting with Texas, Ohio State at 10 a.m. local, which is just awesome. Bama, Florida State, Clemson, LSU. And then obviously the big nightcap for us in Ram country with CSU opening up the season against Washington in Husky Stadium late night. So you're going to need your caffeine ready. I caught up with Roman Tomashoff, who covers Washington. He is one of the co-hosts of the LockedOnHuskies podcast. He also writes for the Huskies Wire, which is, another one of those national outlets that specializes in local coverage. I was one of the founding writers for the Broncos Wire over a decade ago now, so it's kind of funny to kind of see that relationship come full circle. But Roman was awesome. In about 15 minutes, we're going to play about a 30-minute interview with him. He gets into all of the details you're going to need to know going into this matchup, sets the scene for Washington by kind of talking about Jedd Fisch and the temperature for him after the first season. They obviously went undefeated at home last year, but they went winless on the road. And I think similarly to CSU, there is a big desire within that fan base to build off of what they accomplished last year and kind of take things to the next level. I talked about offensive and defensive standouts, got into what stands out about CSU to him. One of the things he really focused on is the experience of this CSU Rams roster, which I think is a valid thing to point out coming into this game. But yeah, we'll get to that interview here in just a couple of minutes with Roman. I appreciate everybody rocking live with us this morning on YouTube. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, saying what's up in the Toyota chat, all of that fun stuff. If you've got any questions, comments, etc., keep them firing. If I can't get to them right away, we'll star it and we will come full circle at the end of the show. Before we get into this CSU-Washington matchup, I did just briefly want to give some week 1 reactions. We had a lot of games last night, which was awesome. Feels so good to have college football back, guys. I'm stoked, but it was our first look at the preseason pick to win the league, Boise State, who got thumped pretty good in their trip to South Florida. I believe the final score was 31-7. I pull that up real quick. But it was definitely a matchup, 34-7. It was a matchup where I would say for most of the night, it was far closer and far more competitive than that final score may indicate. Felt like there were a couple of big momentum plays, what I call spark plays, and we'll get into that with CSU later on, that really escalated things. I mean, the turnovers were killer for Boise. You knew they'd want to lean on that ground game. And the first drive of the night, they're moving the ball pretty well. Madsen was actually in a rhythm throwing the ball, but Sherrod puts the ball on the ground. Later on, Sire Gaines fumbles when they had passed the 50 as well. So, I mean, that's 2 promising drives that seem poised for points. And then, you put the ball on the ground, it's killer. South Florida pulled out the fake punt when it's a 3-point game, halfway through the third quarter. That took some stones to do that. Executed it to perfection, like a 45-yard bomb. Really fun play. It was a fun matchup, to be honest with you. I was a little bit conflicted at times with my rooting interest. I do think that just with all of us going into the Pac-12, there is a sense of camaraderie, and there is something to be said about wanting all of these schools to hold their ground and to make a good impression on a national level. That said, now that we're in the heat of the season, the football fan in me, the petty, spiteful football fan in me did take a little bit of enjoyment in seeing a very loud fan base humbled a little bit. I mean, one of the things that I've talked about, and it always pisses Boise State fans off when I do, but one of the things I've mentioned repeatedly these last couple of years is that the gap between Boise State and the rest of the Mountain West just isn't what it used to be. And that's not to say that it's not a great program. You look at the success that they've had over the last 25 years, it's been incredible to see. They are the standard at the top of the league, and they're at the top of the mountain until somebody knocks them off of it. But if you watch every game in this league, like I basically do, I mean, miss a few here and there, but if you follow the conference closely, year in and year out, you can see the gap has closed. You know, the matchups are far more competitive. It's not 2011 where they're coming into everybody's stadium and hanging 60 on the board. Still a great team. Again, obviously last year, they were really fun to watch. Gianti was a monster. He essentially single-handedly carried them to the playoff along with a stout defense. I still think that defense is going to be pretty good, although I would have some questions about the secondary if I were a Boise fan right now. Those South Florida receivers were running wide open all night. And it's not like that quarterback is exactly, you know, an NFL caliber guy throwing the ball. I mean, he's got a strong arm, throws a pretty nice deep ball, but he kind of reminded me of, I don't know, like vintage Dante Culpepper. Culpepper was more accurate consistently and a better thrower of the football. But I mean, big dude looking for the contact. There was one point where he trucked a safety going into the end zone. Another one where a corner picked up a personal foul, slammed him to the ground, and the very next play drops the shoulder, runs straight through him, and kind of gives him a stare down as he's doing it. It got me heated. Like I was kind of on the fence in terms of my rooting interest, and then watching that South Florida QB drop the shoulder a couple times, I'm not going to lie, it put me fully in their corner. He played with a swagger that, you know, the legendary BVP would have approved of. I kind of liked it. It was a really physical game. The physicality of South Florida's defense was a significant factor, and I think Boise struggled a little bit with it. And, you know, as CD Stick says here in the Toyota chat, Madsen is who he thought he was, which is, and I'm not even trying to say this in a derogatory way, but he's a game manager. You know, he makes really good decisions with the football. He spreads it around. I think he makes good reads. He's not going to put you in harm's way, but a lot of his completions are dink and dunk. You know, it's within 3-5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and you're counting on the receiver to make somebody miss after the fact. It's how they scored their touchdown. Chris Marshall makes a nice play, run a little double slant, and, you know, open up some space for him. And to his credit, you know, he makes a nice play and gets into the end zone. But when you can stop the run against Boise, when you can make them one-dimensional, if you can press their receivers and kind of take away some of that underneath game, it makes that offense fairly pedestrian. You know, he's not a guy vertically, or especially like, you know, in the middle of the field, you know, 15, 20 yards down the field, that strikes a lot of fear into the heart of defenses. I've been pretty honest about where I've been with him, like going back to last year. And that's not to say that he's not a good quarterback. I think he's still easily a top 2, top 3 quarterback. I voted for him to be first team all conference, despite the fact that I don't think he's better than even say CSU's QB Braden. Physically, I don't think that's the case. But I think when you're the returning leader in touchdown passes and completion percentage and yards and everything like he was, he deserved that right to be the preseason, you know, all conference selection. Preseason offensive player of the year, a little bit debatable, I would say, but I will say, you know, if you're the rest of the league, and I'm not going to sit here and like act like this is some victory lap. I still had Boise, you know, first in my preseason power rankings. I still think they're going to be a really good team. And again, that matchup, I really do feel like was closer than the final score shows if you watched all of it. But, you know, if you're CSU, if you're San Jose State, if you're UNLV, although they'll need to show a lot more than they did in week 1, they play tonight against Sam Houston. We'll see. I think you've got to be looking around and being like, they look human. You know, there's some blood in the water. We have an opportunity here to compete, you know, for a conference championship. And, you know, obviously there's a ton of football left to be played. Again, like, this isn't me trying to dance on their grave or anything like that. I don't think that's going to be the case. I still think they're the front runner in this league, but they're human, you know, and they bleed just like we do. And I think that was probably pretty confidence inspiring if you're the rest of the conference, especially a team like CSU, who's hoping to capitalize on, you know, having a 3rd-year veteran quarterback and a ton of talent at the skill positions and more size and athleticism on the defensive side than we've seen in recent years. I mean, there's a lot to be confident about going into this year. And I think that week 1 performance made things interesting. Probably has some college football playoff implications as well. The Athletic projected Tulane and not Boise to make the playoff this year. This result probably makes that more likely. I think if you're Boise at this point, you probably would have to, outside of that Notre Dame game, and you're going to have to show something in that one, but you're going to have to run the table likely. I don't know if you're going to get the benefit of the doubt if, there's somebody out of the American who's sitting there like 11-1 and has a Power 4 win or something like that. But interesting way to start the season. That is for sure. Makes it feel like the league is wide open. Wyoming and Akron was kind of a snoozer. Chris Durr, man, I said it coming into the year. I did think they were going to be much improved offensively. I'd heard a lot of good things about the receivers. I'm a big John Michael Gillenborg fan, but Durr had like 190 yards. I think 130 of them were after the catch. Had a big touchdown where he makes a couple guys miss in the open field. He's a blur. He could be an issue. We'll say that. And I hate saying stuff like this, but it feels like a classic guy that's not going to be in Laramie next season. San Diego State thumped Stony Brook. I'm not going to lie, didn't watch a second of that game, watch the highlights. That's what you should do against an FCS team at home. What stood out to me more than anything was the crowd. I mean, I know it's Stony Brook, but my God, San Diego State, you got to support that football program going into the Pac-12. Cincinnati, Nebraska, 2017. So, I mean, it's a competitive game, but I thought that was kind of a snoozer too. Rough showing for our former friend Caleb Goodie. Fumbled his first catch. They tried to target him on a vertical route, actually, to try and take the lead late. Gets picked off. I've said it a lot. Again, like, this isn't trying to be overreactionary or anything like that, but he's a great athlete, has incredible speed. He has a lot of growth in terms of becoming a complete receiver, and that speed isn't going to be quite as big, of an advantage, going up against some of these bigger, more athletic teams. It just doesn't stand out quite as much, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Before we get into this interview and kind of set the scene for Washington, I implore everybody to check out. We had a ton of preseason content, and now's a great time to become a DNVR diehard. You can do it for just $36 on an intro offer. If you've never been one, you get a free t-shirt. You get access to all of our content. I published a piece yesterday that kind of talked about how the recent roster results in the NFL, having 3 rookies make the 53-man, 4 in the last 2 years out of the Norvell era of players, Stonehouse and some of those guys, even like Mo technically played for him for 1 year, but he wasn't like a Norvell guy. 4 of his guys, though, the last 2 years have gone to the NFL. They've all been transfers. They have a really good idea of the type of guys that they are trying to sign in the portal. And the biggest thing is they want guys who are hungry for an opportunity. And when you look at the Dallin Holkers of the world, the Drew Mosses and Dom Jones, they all fit that exact same mold, whether you're, dropping down from a program like BYU or whether you're coming up from Lamar College or North Dakota State. You're looking for a chance to prove themselves. All of those guys got that at CSU. Now they're in the league. That is a really great selling point on the recruiting trail, that proof of concept of if you come here, you can develop, you can be seen nationally, and you can go on and make a lot of money in the NFL. I love it. I would, again, ask all of you to become a diehard Sport Local Journalism, sign up. Just real quick, in a rapid fire, a couple of thoughts on the Too Deep. If you missed it, post it on Twitter. I think we can pop it up here on the screen. Jalen Dupree, running back 1. Not surprising. He is undeniable at this point. I think he is going to tear it up. I expect, Avant and Marshall to be a big part of it as well, but I've been hyping this dude up for a long time, really since he signed, because he's the real deal. And I think he's going to tear it up this year. This is by far the deepest backfield CSU's had since 2017 when they had Dalen, Izzy, and Kinsey. I think Dupree's better than any of those guys. So I'm really excited to see what can be. And, the crazy thing is, like, Keegan Hollis is a great athlete. He's made plays when he's gotten opportunities. Javion Kennard, a true freshman, he's a spark plug too. They've just got so much talent in that backfield. I saw some, comments on the receivers. The top 6 or so are all going to play. I think at times we get too focused on who's 1, who's 2. You're going to be often, going 3-4 wide at a time. You need more than this. Same thing with the corners. Everyone was freaking out. First of all, they showed nickel instead of the opposite corner. It's not like Lamondre Joe and CJ Blocker aren't going to play. CJ Blocker was on the coaches show this week, guys. Like, those guys are all going to have big roles. don't get too overreactionary. They're going to be very multiple on the defensive side. This is just kind of highlighting some of the other areas that are involved. Although I will say the fact that John Smith made the 2-deep, testament to the true freshman's athleticism. That dude can freaking fly. Josh says they did update this, J Mike. There's now 2 cornerbacks listed. That makes sense. I kind of figured that was just an oversight. But yeah, I mean, not a ton of big surprises there. Jack Moran being on the 2-deep is exciting. I think it's cool how much homegrown talent is going to play a factor, and not just like necessarily Colorado kids, but kids you're signing and developing out of high school. You know, it's going to be 3 of your starting offensive linemen, both your starting defensive tackles, you know, and Lorich and Moran. That's a great sign for sustained success. And that continuity is a big deal year to year. Like, obviously some of these guys, you never know, you hope not, that might leave down the line in the portal. But right now, like in the trenches, I think they're going to reap the rewards of really sound recruiting efforts these last couple of years. And that's one of those things that takes time. And that's one of those things that I always come back to when people start itching to hit the reset button. Is it's not easy to build up the depth in the trenches. It takes multiple years. Like, I don't care if you're Bama, I don't care if you're CU, I don't care if you're whoever. Like, you might be able to sign, you know, a stud in like Jordan Seaton, but, you know, look at the struggles they've had filling out a line around him. It takes time. You got to be able to sign guys and develop them. We're going to get to that interview here. Let me shout out a couple of our partners, and then we'll play that interview with Roman Tomashoff of the Huskies Wire. All right, I am so amped for the NFL season to be here. Everybody knows I'm a big Broncos fan, got a ton of stuff on the set. My family's had season tickets for over 50 years, grew up in that stadium. The Game Time app is a great way to get tickets, particularly last minute. You know, we have a lot of people that just come down to the DNVR tailgates and hang out, and then they check out the prices on Game Time. If they can get a deal, then they go in. Nobody makes the process easier than our friends with Game Time. It's really the hack for unlocking great tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Incredibly easy to use. The Game Time guarantee means you can trust 100% authentic tickets on time at the best price. I've used Game Time a ton for, you know, Nuggets games and stuff like that when I'm in Denver. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness, perfect for Colorado. It doesn't matter if you're driving around, you know, Cap Hill, if you're going off-roading somewhere on the western slope, something like that, maybe going skiing. Toyota has the perfect vehicle for you. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive. They've got 16 different hybrids to choose from. So if you still want that dependability, you want that versatility, but you're looking for a more, you know, environmentally conscious type car, they've got an option for you. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Finally, we are launching the Supporters Club for people to support DNVR directly. Sign up on our YouTube page. It's $5 a month if you don't want to become a diehard, or if you're just looking for another way to support us. This is a fun way to do it. You get a badge next to your name in the Toyota chat. Badges update over time based on how long you've been a member, 1 month, 2 month, etc. It's a literal badge of honor. It kind of shows how diehard you are. You get custom DNVR emojis and all kinds of stuff like that. You can also join the Hall of Fame tier for $15 to unlock bonus content. It's a fun way to support DNVR. So shout out that. Shout out to Supporters Club. Shout out to all of you. So much love. Let's get to that interview here. Part 1 with Roman Tomashoff. Washington insider joining the show today. Roman Tomashoff, UW insider with the Huskies Wire podcast, or Huskies Wire is where he does the writing, I should say. Co-host of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I should get that right, considering I was one of the original writers for the Denver Broncos Wire like 10 years ago. But it's great to have you on, man. Thanks for doing this.
Justin, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Before we get into the Washington stuff, and obviously you're much more qualified to, you know, give insight into the Huskies than I am. I was kind of snooping on your social media stuff, and I saw your pinned tweet. You were on the Kelly Clarkson show with Gronk. I got to hear that backstory a little bit.
Oh, so it's a phenomenal backstory. I've had people ask me a lot. My dad actually is a producer on the Kelly Clarkson show, and I grew up a huge Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics fan. Yes, I live in Washington. Yes, I'm an annoying Boston fan. I get a lot of grief about it. But on several different occasions, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I had run-ins with Gronk that were not necessarily positive, not due to anything he did. Where the first time was he did a book signing at the Grove in LA, like one of the big malls down there. And I tried to take a selfie with him where I put my arm down on this massive table and his security people started yelling at me. And I was 17 years old, like I just graduated high school. And they're like, "What are you doing? Like, don't do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then a couple months later, I was flying back after I went to school out in Boston. I was flying back after my first semester, and he was on the same flight because he was doing Kimmel or something the next day. And we're getting off the plane. I was like, "Oh my God, that's Gronk." And so I go over. I'm just like, "Hey, Gronk, I just want to take a picture, do whatever." And once again, I was yelled at by his security team. Who somebody turned around and just snaps at me. He's not taking pictures, and he just walks out because obviously, he is who he is. It was 2016. He's an all-pro tight end. And so when they learned, my dad learned he was coming on for, I think he was promoting Bounty or something. These stories were told in production meetings, and I got to go in and do a segment where I threw the show to the first commercial break and just, "Hey, lifelong Patriots fan. Tried to meet you several times, didn't work out for various reasons, and it was really cool. He was amazing, and my dad's worked in show business for a long time, so just being able to be a part of that and fly to New York for a 36-hour whirlwind was really one of the most fun days I've had in a long time. And I was at the national championship like a month before that, so there was a whole lot going on in my life at that time.
That's a good stretch. I mean, getting to be around Kelly Clarkson's pretty cool too. Although if your
she's
dad's
wonderful.
a producer, yeah.
One of my claims to fame now is Kelly Clarkson, who's gotten very into fantasy football over the last couple of years, is a big Rome Odunze fan now because I told her to draft him last season. So I will take a lot of pride in that.
I love it. That's cool, dude. All right, I guess we can just jump into it. I saw that on your Twitter, and I was like, I gotta ask him about it.
It's a great question.
So fascinated. But obviously we've got a lot to get into with this week one matchup. Before I kind of get you to give some names that CSU fans should be aware of, I'm curious, just what is the general consensus right now? Like, what is the temperature with the Washington football program going into year two under Jedd Fisch? Had a ton of success at home last year, obviously less so on the road, although probably some wonky travel factors in that, especially like the Rutgers game and like stuff like that. But just where are Washington fans generally at with the Jedd Fisch era going into 2025?
I would say if you want a temperature check, the heat is starting to turn up. And I say that because last season, while, as you point out, there are several things that went really well. Obviously, going undefeated at home for the third straight season is really nice. Going 0-7 in neutral site games and away from Husky Stadium is probably what I should say, was not great, but you also did that with a severe lack of depth in the trenches. Yeah. Where you look at the defensive line last season after Javon Parker went down, outside of Sebastian Valdez, who's had a really nice preseason with the San Francisco 49ers, there wasn't necessarily a whole lot to write home about on the interior of the defensive line. You look at the offensive line, which was just totally decimated following Kalen DeBoer's departure and several guys, obviously Troy Fautanu, Roger Rosengarten, going in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft. There was a lot that wasn't necessarily going to look great, and then rebuilding through just the spring transfer portal window was very difficult. So I would say that that's where, I look at this season and I think there's the most room for optimism and improvement, where those are both bottom of the barrel units last season. And if they are comfortably middle of the road this year, this team is ready for a massive step forward. And you look at both lines, you got an infusion of talent and experience on the defensive line with guys like Ontario Thompson, who's had stops at Iowa and Western Michigan, Samote Pepa, who's an all Pac-12 defensive tackle at Utah, and then Taitai Uyunglele, who was a really nice player at Arizona for the last couple of seasons. And then on the offensive line, you bring in Carver Willis from Kansas State, Garen Hatchett, a former UW guy who transferred to Oklahoma for the 2024 season. You've got some experience there, plus some real nice young talent in redshirt freshman Paki Finau and true freshman John Mills, who are both going to have some kind of playing time at left guard. It seems like it's going to be pretty close to 50-50 in terms of the snap count, at least in week one. And I think that's where the most room for optimism is, because you look at the skill positions. You're really excited about Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston on offense. Everyone loves what Damon Williams brings to the table from a skill set standpoint. You look at the defense, Tacario Davis, getting him out of the transfer portal is such a huge win. And you just look all over the field, and there is real, young, and somewhat unproven talent for the most part, but real talent. And this is the season where it feels like it could all come together.
I've got two things I want to touch on based on what you just said, because the left guard battle is certainly something I've been keeping an eye on, just trying to be like, what's this lineup going to look like? Is that worrisome at all that, you're going into week one and that's not sorted out? Or do you feel it's more of a, man, we've got two legitimate options, man, what an abundance of riches here?
I think it's more of the latter because I've gotten that question a lot. It's a really good question because people love Paki Finau. This is a guy who's a former four-star recruit from Oak Hills High School in California who didn't play last year a whole bunch because he was a little bit undersized, which is okay, right? He's a true freshman coming in. But then Washington goes out and flips John Mills away from Texas late in the process. And this is a dude who just came in. And I remember he was on an unofficial visit during a spring practice last year as he was still going through the recruiting process. And it was him and SMU transfer Marcus Bryant were both visiting at that time. And if you didn't know who was who, you would have assumed that John Mills was the all AAC tackle. Like he's just that level of physical specimen at 6'6", 320, whatever he is right now. And, obviously getting him from Texas is still a very, very big deal. And the coaching staff is very clearly excited about both guys, and you want to find a way to work them both in at some point. So while some people might say if you've got two guys battling for one spot, you don't really have a starter, and, there could be problems. Both of them have taken a lot of first team reps throughout the spring, throughout the fall. They both seem perfectly ingrained with the first team offensive line if they needed to take 80, 90% of the snaps. And I think it's just something where you look at the way the room shapes up this year. Both of those guys are very clearly big parts of the plan for Jedd Fisch's offensive line moving forward this year, 2026 and beyond. So the question is just more, how are you going to find a way to get both these guys on the field than it is, oh, why hasn't one person won out yet?
I also want to ask you, because you mentioned they're just like basically wanting to see this team take the next step, which I think is kind of where CSU is at. And obviously there's levels to this, different conferences, different thing. But, the Rams last year, they won 8 games for the first time in a decade. They made a bowl game. All of that is objective success, or it's proof of concept that you're improving from year to year. What is like the realistic target for Washington this year where you're doing your post pod, like the season's up, we're looking back on everything. And this is hard to do in the preseason, but like, what do you feel like is the goal? Like, what's the number this team needs to get to where undeniably, like, this was what we needed to see in year 2 of the Jedd Fisch era?
I would say it's 8 or 9 wins. And you look at the way the schedule shapes up, you have your 3 toughest games at home. It's Ohio State, it's Illinois, it's Oregon. And you still have to travel to some tough places, Michigan, Wisconsin, obviously, just standing out at the top of that list. But with the way the schedule lines up and with the way that Jedd Fisch has been building up this team with all the young talent that you have across this roster, if things start to click late in the year and you can find ways to, eke out a couple of these road wins, whether it be, your first 2 road games are at Washington State and at Maryland. And then later on the year, Wisconsin, we'll see what that team ends up looking like. UCLA is a team I still have some major questions about as well, where there's a realistic chance that you can go 3-2, 4-1 on the road. And if you combine that with, maybe dropping 1 or 2 of these games at home to teams that are more talented than you right now, when you just look at straight up recruiting rankings, like there's no reason that Washington can't take a big step forward this season with the influx of talent that they have.
So I'm curious then, like, what is kind of both like your viewpoint going into this week 1 matchup with CSU, and then just what do you feel like the pulse is with the fan base, in the sense that, you do have Wazoo week 3, you've got Ohio State week 4. I don't think it would offend CSU fans if I said, Washington's probably overlooking CSU and UC Davis to an extent. But I guess I am just curious, like, what is the general outlook going into this CSU game? Like, how do you feel about this matchup?
I know I can speak for all Washington fans when I say this. After what happened in 2021 against Montana, UW will never overlook a week 1, week 2 opponent like that ever again. After they came in and upset that Jimmy Lake team to open the 2021 season. No, I really do think that this is one of those teams, these games where I look at what Colorado State brings to the table, and they've just got so much experience, right? Like I look at Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, I look at some guys on this defense, and I just think that this is going to be a really intriguing test for Washington that can't be overlooked because last year at this time it was, are these guys gonna be able to play together? So many players on this team didn't get there until fall camp, so there were chemistry issues. There were different things that just needed to be worked out from a schematic standpoint because the offensive line wasn't figured out until like a week before the start of the season. Now it's just kind of, oh yeah, so much fun, right? Now seeing all these guys that have been together since January, that's what I really want to see in this game, where I think that Colorado State provides a nice test for Washington in the same realm where, Justin, you just touched on it, where CSU won 8 games last year. Like this is no slouch of an opponent. Obviously, Torrey Horton's living up here now, and there's something to be said for that. But I look at what Washington brings to the table, and there's a lot of talent that I am really excited about. But there's still something to be said for they have not played another opponent yet, and I'd like to see it play out that way. And I'm very confident that Washington can overcome some of these challenges that they're going to see early on in the season. But there's still a level of questions that need to be answered, especially with the way that early last season went, especially against Washington State.
I posted from our DNVR Rams account, kind of asking what are some questions that CSU fans would like a UW insider to dive into, and I thought one of the interesting ones that I got was essentially what stands out about CSU from a UW insider's perspective. Like you've mentioned Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, third-year starting quarterback a little bit. It seems like you've got some respect for him, but just what stands out to you about CSU in this matchup?
I think it's some of the experience on defense. Like I look at the edge rushers. I wrote everything down to make sure I got everything right. Paul Tangelo and Jaquez Evans. I really like them. The name of the transfer safety, which is escaping from Holy Cross. I'm a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his tape as well. And I just think that there's a lot of experience on the defensive side of the ball that I'm really curious about, because if you ask any Washington fan, they will tell you right now that the biggest thing that they want to see is what the offensive line looks like. So I just look across this unit, and I think that there are not necessarily ways that are going to be, there are things that are going to be done that can majorly expose the offensive line, but I want to see what it looks like from a cohesiveness standpoint. I look at right tackle Jerez Party, who was one of the lowest graded offensive linemen in the Big Ten last season, according to Pro Football Focus. The coaching staff is really excited about him. They believe he's taken a big step forward, but I want to see it against especially just this experienced pair of edge rushers and what that might look like. I think those are the things that I'm going to be watching really closely this Saturday.
Kind of off of that, you've got a young quarterback who flashed a ton of upside. I mean, he was great in the bowl. He's a playmaker. You look at the touchdown interception ratio, all of that very, very encouraging. But did play behind a shaky O-line last year, and I've been around that, where you can cover a guy who maybe develops some bad habits because of the fact that he got beaten up a little bit and stuff like that. Just what are you looking to see from him, like especially early on in this season?
One thing that I'm really curious about, where it showed up a little bit in the mock game that Washington held a couple of weeks ago, was his timing over the middle of the field was just a hair off. And a big reason for that is Denzel Boston, the preseason All-American wide receiver, had not really practiced up until a couple of days before that. He had a sports hernia that he had surgery on in January, February, that caused him to miss a decent amount of spring practice and fall camp. So he got back a little bit late. And I think that showed early on, but I just look at this trio of receivers and I'm curious to see what that's going to look like. That's why, we spent so much time talking about the offensive line, because then I look at the receivers outside of Denzel Boston. Rashid Williams is somebody who I'm really high on. I think he's got a lot of potential. And then true freshman Raiden Vinesbright, who's going to be Washington's third starting receiver. He's a guy with a lot of upside that I'm really excited about. I love the way he can stretch the field. He was someone who made a lot of plays throughout the spring and fall camp whenever he's on the field. And then freshman All-American tight end Decker DeGraff is another guy who can make plays and proved it last year, where he averaged something close to 20 yards a catch. Like, there are a lot of really exciting playmakers on this offense, but it's like I said a little bit earlier, a lot of them just don't have a lot of production under their belts just yet. So my biggest curiosity from that standpoint would be who is going to step up and who is going to be that consistent number two target for Damon Williams, and what is that timing going to look like early on in the season?
All right, we'll get right back to that interview with Roman, get more of his perspective. Again, if you're rocking live with us, say what's up in the Toyota chat, give us a thumbs up, all that fun stuff. Let's shout out our partners, and then we'll keep that interview rolling. You know the moment, that one where you're driving away and you realize, shoot, I left my sunglasses at the airport, at the beach, at the pool, wherever. I've been there. It's the worst. Makes you really question all of your decisions. Shady Rays, though, they've helped us change the game. You can wear sunglasses wherever and you can feel confident, because if you lose them, if you break them, whatever, you're going to be fine. They'll replace them, all pairs backed by lost and broken replacements. You can get seriously good-looking, polarized, durable, and not stupidly expensive frames. I love my Shady Rays. I legitimately wear them everywhere, walking the dog, chilling poolside. They're durable, they're comfy, they're stylish. They've got something for everyone. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com, use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I also want to shout out to the longest partner we've had on this show, and that, of course, is Breckenridge Brewery. Check out Breck Brew's new West Coast style IPA. This double dry hop brew is inspired by the untamed beauty of Colorado's trails, creates bright notes of citrus and pine. You know we love Breck Brews at DNVR. They are the official craft beer of DNVR, and they are because they've got a beer for any occasion. There's no better way to watch a game than, putting your feet up, cracking open an ice-cold Breck Brew. Avalanche Amber Ale is a staple. You can't go wrong there. Fun Slinger is one of my favorite. The Good Company hard seltzers are awesome as well. Check out the Breck Beer Locator at breckbrew.com and find a brew near you. All right, we're going to play the second half of that interview with Roman Tomashoff, get more inside perspective on Washington. Then I'll give out 3 keys to the game for CSU. We'll give a brief update on what's happening in Agland. CSU football, killing it, 4-0 to start the year. But here's part 2 of that interview with Roman. What's your impression of the run game going into this year? I mean, Coleman went for 1,000 yards last year. I know the yards per carry weren't tremendous. Some of that was maybe not his fault. Jay Norvell actually called him who he thought is the most talented player on the Washington football team.
I don't know if I can disagree with that. Obviously, I love what Damon brings to the table. I'm also a huge fan of cornerback Tacario Davis from a pure talent standpoint.
Yeah,
like that's the kind of guy, where if he's the first cornerback off the board, it's the way he moves that size too is just out of this world. Like if he's the first corner off the board next year's draft, like don't be shocked. Like that's the level of confidence I have in him. But I look at Jonah, and it's really funny because Justin, you're not wrong when you say that his yards per carry were way down last season. It's just crazy to think about that. Like, he averages 6 yards a carry in his career. Like, that's what kind of player he is. And he forced 67 missed tackles last season, picked up 833 yards after contact. He is a really, really talented player. But I look at him this season, I think that there's a lot of things to be confident about. I just don't know what kind of workload he's going to see. Mm-hmm. And it's not, through any fault of his own. He's a very, very talented player, as you just said. I look at the guys around him. What's Damon Williams' workload going to look like on the ground? How many times are you going to run a zone read? Or are you just going to run a quarterback keeper? Because you can do that. Adam Muhammad is a really, really talented sophomore running back who this coaching staff is extremely excited about. I'm very curious to see how much they want to factor him into this mix. Jordan Washington, a redshirt freshman with 10.2 speed from his high school days in California. Like, there's a lot of talent at the running back position, and it all starts with Jonah Coleman. But I'm just really curious to see how much of a rotation this coaching staff really wants to use early on in the season, especially because when you get to the Ohio States, the Michigans, like it's going to be Jonah's show.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, just watching him, like you could see how hard he was working for some of those yards last year. So it was hard for me to, it was one of those, like, I feel like if you just glance at the yards per carry, he's easy to kind of gloss over. And then it's like, well, do a little bit deeper of a dive and you'll see this guy's a stud. Kind of off of that, going to the other side of the ball defensively, you guys played a ton of man last year. You had size. You still have great size at corner with both of them being 6'4", I think. What does that look like, though, under Ryan Walters? Like, how different is it from what you see a year ago?
That's a great question because It is and it isn't different at the same time. Where I look at the defensive front, and we're going to see a whole lot more like the five-man bear front with a pair of outside linebackers and three defensive tackles. But we're also going to see just a continuation of what Steve Belichick showed last year with a lot of press man coverage on the outside. And as you said, yeah, losing Thaddeus Dixon in North Carolina hurts, but when you're replacing him with Takario Davis, certainly eases the blow quite a bit. And then I look at the nickel position where you're going to see Leroy Bryant start and probably Rashawn Clark get into the rotation a decent amount. Those are two guys who are also just aggressive and physical and good in run support. And those are probably going to be the guys where Braden Fowler Nicolosi is going to look to test early on, in my opinion, at least, because they are just way less proven than the seniors on the outside. And I'm excited about what this cornerback trio brings because it is just aggressiveness and talent and just they all fit this scheme so well. I'm just curious to see what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I'm intrigued too. I'm interested to see how CSU attacks it. Like, I think it's tough, to go up against that type of length. CSU's maybe a little not light, but they don't have a ton of height at receiver. They've got two tight ends that are 6'5 plus, and I think you'll see a pretty steady dose of both of those guys. But that's certainly something I'm interested to see. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate you hopping on with us. I do have a couple more questions for you, though, from the Ram fam, as we call them, on CSU Twitter. But somebody would like to know, what is your thoughts just on all this conference realignment stuff? Like Washington's a longtime Pac-12 institution. Obviously, now you're in the Big Ten. But CSU's a part of this, what's going to be, the new era of the Pac-12. And I know there's a lot of opinions on whether it's a power conference, this and that. To me, from like our standpoint, it's very clearly a step up, and you'd rather be on that side than the side that gets left behind. So like, we'll take it. But just what are your thoughts on all this? Is it weird to not be a Pac-12 school anymore?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, RIP the original Pac-12. Like truly, it sucks that it all happened this way. And for anybody blaming Oregon and Washington, you're ridiculous.
It really starts
all
with Texas and OU.
Oh, it absolutely does. And Larry Scott, if we really want to just throw a whole bunch of blame, but blame USC, blame UCLA. That's who really killed the original iteration of the Pac-12. But it's Justin, you nailed it. It's adapt or die. And this move, as much as I loved growing up with Pac-12, growing up in Los Angeles and going to watch UW whenever they played USC or UCLA, which it's great that, those games still exist. But it does suck to see that the way all of this has happened. But at the same point, if Washington didn't make this move, they would have been left behind. And for a school that has been at the top of the mountain, that was literally just 2.5 good quarters of football away from winning a national championship. Like if we really want to get down to brass tacks when it comes to that national championship game, like they really were that close. You can't sit here and say that sitting around with the Pac-12 and everything that was going on with that media rights deal and what it was going to look like was the best move for a school of this caliber. And I think it's awesome that Colorado State has made this move as well, because getting in the Pac-12, being part of that brand is so exciting. Like I said, I went to school in Boston, and the whole Pac-12 After Dark thing when living out there, it was great because it does get some people excited, not everyone, as we saw in, some of the AP polls and the way that those things played out for so long.
Well,
but
when you submit your ballot 3 hours before the last games are even kicking off, it's tough to have an accurate representation of the entire
absolutely.
Of college football.
And I mean, just shout out to Chris McCaffrey, who just had his Heisman stolen by people who saying, I didn't watch you play. I didn't vote for you. That's ridiculous. Like it's sad that we're still at that level, but also that's what comes with the Big Ten conference at this point in time, where it is a true coast to coast conference. And just with discussions I've had with people like my good buddy, Jake Butt, who's just one of the anchors over there and has done a great job calling games and everything, seeing what kind of publicity that network has done for schools like Washington and just all four schools that have made this move, really, it's awesome. It's really exciting. And if you have an opportunity to move up in the world, you take it. It's no different than getting a promotion at a job, in my opinion, because that's really what this is at the end of the day, where there's more money involved, there's more exposure involved. And that's like, as much as college football is about tradition, that's what this game has become. And you need to just kind of get it on board.
Yeah, I get torn, because I understand the business side of things, and I would agree with you 100%. I also have a hard time when it's Friday night and I'm watching Washington and Rutgers, and this is a conference game.
Yeah, that's fair.
And and then like you hear certain, I think Fish complained at one point about the logistics of the travel, and then that's when you get into the situation where it's like, well, this is what you signed up for. But it's one of those, like, I think they made the move that was best for them at that time, especially with Oregon going over. Like, you want to stay with them, keep those brands together. But I don't know, it does lead to some unfortunate reality. CSU and Wyoming have played every year continuously, going back to the last time they were disrupted was like World War II, I believe, in the 40s. Now we're not going to play the next 2 years because of conference realignment. Oregon and Oregon State, who knows what happens with that down the line? Washington State. I don't love that element as like a
It's
college
fair.
football purist.
Absolutely. No, exactly. And that's the part of it that sucks. And it's why, especially here in Washington, it's awesome to see that Apple Cup be kept alive for at least the next 5 years. And it seems like both sides are very willing to try to work out a way to continue that game moving forward, which is great. And that's honestly the way that it should be. You should find ways to, and that's one of the other things I enjoy about the way the Big Ten has just started to ingrain these four schools with having a protected rivalry at the end of the year where, yeah, we know that Oregon Washington is always going to be that last game of the season when for a long time that was Washington State. Is it still weird that it's not? Yeah, absolutely. But then again, this is, as you said, it's just part of what you signed up for with this.
And you get used to it. I mean, as much as like I can complain about certain things, it's not like realignment's new. I mean, we can go back to the Southwestern Athletic Conference being poached to go from the Big 8 to the Big 12 before any of this even started, in the 90s. Like it's always been a thing, but I was just kind of curious to get your perspective on it all. One last question for you that we have from the Twitter gallery here. Who has been the biggest surprise of fall camp for you so far for Washington?
Ooh, that is a phenomenal question. It's a guy who made the depth chart, and I was really happy to see it because I didn't, I had my doubts just in terms of he got here late as a June enrollee. That's true freshman wide receiver Desmond Roebuck. I'm just enamored with what this kid brings to the table. He is so talented. Every day you look up and he's finding ways to separate and make plays. He's not the biggest guy in the field. He's listed at 5'9", 5'10", somewhere in that ballpark, but he's got sticky hands. He's a really crisp route runner. And is someone who, again, every day he just found ways to get open and make plays. And to see Jetfish reward that by giving him a spot on the depth chart, even though he was, again, a June enrollee, is awesome because that's the kind of guy where Washington signed 5 receivers in the 2025 recruiting class. 3 of them got here in January. Braden Weisbright was one of them. 4-star Chris Lawson and 3-star Marcus Harris were the other guys. Unfortunately, the latter 2 were sidelined for a good portion of fall camp with injuries. But Desmond Roebuck just came in and looked just as good as them, even though he went to a smaller high school in Arizona. This is a guy who set the all-time state record in receptions down there and is just someone who you can't explain it until you watch him play. It's just he gets open, he makes plays, and he looks like someone who you look at the recruiting rankings, you look at the offers, and you think, this is the guy you're talking about? And then you just watch him take 3 reps at wide receiver. And, oh, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, being a June enrollee and surpassing 3 dudes who had been there for a semester already speaks volumes to like how the staff views him. This was awesome, man. It was great to get an opportunity to meet you. Like I told you before the show, listen to your guys' show, and I think you guys do a great job. But I appreciate you coming on here. Before we let you go, though, I got to put you on the spot. Give me a score prediction for Saturday night. Late night, 9 p.m. our Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Pacific. We're hoping Washington's got some lethargia that sets in over the course of the day or something. We need that Pac-12 after dark energy on the CSU side. But what do you think? Like, I think the last I saw was a 22.5-point spread. If they don't cover that, is that a failure in your opinion?
I really don't think so, and I think a lot of that does kind of lend to the talent, the experience that Colorado State does bring to the table. I'm usually not a score prediction guy, mainly because I'm the world's biggest jinx. I love it.
I will go big on Washington side, man. Let's lean into it.
I saw Bill Connolly with his SP Plus have it at 37-17 Washington. I like that. I'm gonna go 35-10. I think that's something where I'm curious to see what it's going to look like for Washington early on, where if DeMond Williams can get in rhythm, I want to see how much they might want to have him run early on in the season, because this is a guy who, when he gets in the open field, man, can he really move? And I think that's something where if he does break contain a couple of times and can pick up 10, 15, 20 yards with his legs just once or twice in this game, it could really change things early. But it all comes back to the offensive line and what that's going to look like. So 35-10 feels safe enough for me right now.
Fair enough, man. I appreciate you playing along. I'm not a huge score prediction guy either, but I always ask people because
That's fair.
The fans want to know. Make sure you guys are checking out Roman's work. He does great stuff. Go read it at the UW Huskies Wire. Go check out the Locked On Huskies podcast. Certainly the best way to get up to date with all things Washington this season, man. And much love. Thank you for doing this.
Justin, thanks for having me. This has been awesome.
Big shout out to Roman. Make sure you go follow him. Follow Locked On Huskies UW Wire if you have any interest in following Huskies content over the weekend, over the course of the year, all of that stuff. We've got some comments here in the Toyota chat that I want to get to before we move on. Aaron says, checking in from Seattle. LFG. Let's go, buddy. Hope everybody out in Seattle has an awesome time. Great city. Should be a cool setting, right there on the water, especially at night. And again, really hoping to get some of that weirdness, that Pac-12 after dark type vibe going. Aaron says, no need for Shady Rays at a 9 p.m. kickoff, but a Breck brew will hit nicely. Yeah, I mean, we don't wear sunglasses at night over here on this side of things. Joey says the Pac-12 is not a power conference. Let's get real. Joey, you're my boy, longtime supporter of the show. But I say this with love. Who cares? Who cares? If you are clearly the fifth best league, if you have guaranteed access to the playoff, what does it matter? It's all semantics at that point to me. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. The gap between the SEC and the Big Ten to the ACC and the Big 12, it's superior than the gap between, say, a Big 12 without Texas and OU and the current Pac-12 that's building. That's how I feel. Others will disagree, especially on the basketball side, which I think we're probably going to add St. Mary's here pretty soon. That's going to be a really fun league, and to me, it's the best of a bad situation, which is really the most you can hope for at this point. Because I said it before, I'll say it again. We all got left behind. The Big 12, they didn't want Boise. Hang on, let me plug this in. All right, sorry. Accidentally unplugged the laptop charger there, live TV. Aaron also says UW has a nasty tight end, Decker DeGraff. Do we have a backer who can cover this year? I think Owen Long is a phenomenal athlete. I think he's somebody you can depend on. I think they've got a couple of different options at nickel as well. So I think they've got a couple of guys they can throw at him and make things interesting. And I love the depth that they have at corner and then the size and athleticism that they have. But I do agree that networks have ruined the regional rivalries. All right, let's get into three keys against Washington. We'll wrap up with a couple of thoughts. Keep the questions, comments rolling. I'll get to as many as I can. But these, fairly obvious. You could probably do them for most matchups, but I did try and cater them more to this type of setting where you're going out on the road against a bigger school. You're in P4 territory. If you listen back, what was it, last week or the week before, when we kind of went back and looked at those trips to Tuscaloosa, this is very much in the same vein of the things we broke down in that game, the type of things that need to happen in order for you to play a competitive game. When you are 3+ score dogs, you got to have success at the line of scrimmage. If they're going to run it down your throat, it's going to be tough to get off the field. And then, you want to be able to stop the run and get some pressure, on Damon Williams yourself. Now, he is somebody who has the ability to scramble, to extend the play. If you're not keeping containment, he can make you pay in a hurry. And it kind of reminds me with what we saw in that Boise State South Florida game last night, right? I really thought that Boise, the ends especially, less so in the interior, but the ends especially generated pretty consistent pressure. Kudos to South Florida QB. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Did a great job of stepping up though, and kind of taking advantage when those rush lanes where, they got a little bit out of whack. He'd extend the play, boom, and that's definitely something that can happen when you're going up against an athlete like Damon Williams. But you got to have success at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. You got to be able to run the ball with some consistency, keep the sticks moving, extend the drives, all of that basic stuff. Create momentum via spark plays. And what I mean by that is you need to get them, looking around a little bit and sweating, and how you do that, vertical shots, trick plays, a lot of the type of stuff we saw, against CU back in 2023. You're pulling out the Dallin Holker pass play. Maybe you fake a kick, get Taj Bullock involved in some way. You've got to create some momentum with spark plays. Those are explosives. Those are turnovers. Those are the type of plays that really flip momentum. You turn to that Boise game again. It's just really the only one we have to kind of compare it to at the moment. But those forced fumbles, those are spark plays. The fake punt for a touchdown, those are spark plays. You get 2, 3, 4 of those that go in your favor, then all of a sudden, anything is possible. You could be in a 1-score game in the second half or something like that. But you've just got to create some momentum for yourself, because straight up, they're a talented, deeper team. You're going to have to play a pretty much perfect effort in order to pull this one out or really to make it a game. But those are the way that you do it. Finally, your stars got to shine. When you went to Tuscaloosa in 2013, Higgins had a great game. Shaq Barrett was dominating the Bama tackle pretty consistently. You go down to, Tuscaloosa in 2017, and Warren Jackson kind of emerges, scores a couple of touchdowns. If you're going to be able to hang with these types of teams, the stars have got to shine. You need big plays from your best players. If they're going to have any opportunity whatsoever, you need Braden to have a great game. I'm rocking the old school Caleb Haney jersey today, but 16, that's BFN as well. You need him to have kind of like a legacy type performance. We'll see. I'll be curious to see what the crowd is like with the late kickoff. I don't believe Washington students are on campus yet either. They start later in the year. So we'll see, but man, am I excited. I've got some questions here in the Toyota chat. Chris says, will Jay and company pull a fast one on us and pull out the wishbone formation since we are so deep at running back? I don't know if they're going to go wishbone, but I do think that you're going to see a much more open and frankly versatile offense this year. I do think there are going to be times where you go 4 wide and it looks more like the air raid we saw in Reno, with Carson Strong and Romeo Dubs and some of those guys. I do think at times you're going to be under center and it's going to be closer to a pro style scheme, like we saw last year, where you lean on that ground game and you lean on those 2 tight end sets and you try and create off of play action and bootlegs and stuff like that. I'd like to see them use Braden's athleticism a little bit more. I think he's a better runner than he typically gets credit for. Obviously, with Taj back there, it creates all kinds of havoc. He's a guy you might see in the backfield. You might see at receiver. You might see direct snaps to him and like those wildcat scenarios. Who knows? How do you find a way to get him involved? There's so many different ways, but I'm really excited to see how they get all these guys in the mix, because while they maybe don't have a Torrey Horton on paper, who, again, I think if he stays healthy, he's a top 50 pick in the draft last year. You just can't convince me otherwise. But you do have some pro players on the team, and you've got a lot of young talent, and you've got a lot of different options across the board, which has just really not been the case these last couple of years. Lean on those 2 tight ends that you have, lean on the receivers, lean on that backfield, and get it going here. John says, finally caught the show today live. Work is suffering. Thanks, J Mike, and go Rams. My apologies for any productivity that is lost during these live streams, but it's football season. I think your boss will understand. If not, maybe I'll send them a letter. We can come up with like a doctor's note. J Mike excused John from this hour of work for mental health reasons, needs to get ready for the game. Got a lot more comments. I love to see it. Rams team total over 15.5. Please hit tomorrow. Yeah, I'd like to see CSU, score 17, 20 plus points. More than that would be awesome. Like I'd love to see the Rams pull the upset. I'm just trying to be realistic going into this matchup. I don't feel like it's the same as, when you were going into Texas or something like that. Like, I think you should be able to make some plays here, maybe even make it interesting. And if you find yourself in a tight game, in the second half, at that point, anything is possible. Aaron says CSU is not outmatched. It's going to come down to heart and coaching. I certainly feel like in that vein, you can't go in with a play to not lose the game type mentality. It's going to have to be aggressive, 4th and shorts. You're probably gonna have to gamble sometimes. You need touchdowns, not field goals, all of that type of stuff. Josh says over under Taj Bullock 1.5 touchdowns. I mean, over setting multiple touchdowns would be quite the bold prediction. So I guess I would take the under if that's what we're putting it at. But if you put the over under at, let's say, half a touchdown, is he going to score this week? like the odds of that. I would take that. Put a little bit of scratch on it. John says, shout out to Caleb Haney in Forney, Texas. Hell yeah, buddy. Noza Arte says Huskies aren't the same without Penix. That could be the case. I mean, Boise certainly looked like a much more human team without Gienti, although I do think Damon Williams is the truth based on what I saw from last year. We're going to throw it to overtime real quick. If you are watching on the TV, just go to thednvr.com. Get out of here. I did just briefly want to do a little segment, What's Happening in Agland, classic segment that goes back to the audio only days all the way back in 2019. CSU football, CSU women's soccer now 4-0 after beating UTSA 1-0 last night. I know the lingo. Best start in program history. Olivia Fout now averaging a goal per game after scoring once again. She's a stud, looking like a front runner for the Conference Player of the Year. Gray Wilson in net has yet to give up a goal. The Miami transfer has been phenomenal to begin the year. You absolutely love to see it. That is a program that, in my opinion, should be very much like CSU volleyball, track and field, just have consistent success year after year, because Colorado is a powerhouse in producing soccer talent. CSU volleyball opens the season tonight against Colgate. Should be a fun one. I got Washington in town tomorrow. Get to Moby if you can. One of the more unique atmospheres in all of college sports. We were fortunate to have Emily Cohen on a couple of weeks back. If you missed it, I encourage you to go check out that interview. She was awesome. And I will be pulling for them this season. Just kind of some final thoughts. I don't want to go too long, but you got to show something in this game against Washington. It can't be Texas, can't be Michigan. It can't even be, frankly, like the Washington State matchups these last couple of years. You got to throw some punches. You got to inspire some confidence. And I really feel like those home games are kind of going to dictate where this season is going. Shout out to Paul. Shout out to Paul for joining the supporters. I appreciate you, brother. That is awesome. But I got to see something from this offense to validate the confidence that we have. I think there's an opportunity here to get it rolling, to make some plays. And I like that it's a late night game in that aspect. You know, weird stuff happens in those late night games. We've seen it a million times. There's a reason that Pac-12 After Dark moniker became so synonymous within the sport. It's because weird stuff happens in the late night games. Finally, shout out my Bear Creek Bears. Shout out BC, baby. Beat down Lakewood High School last night, 43-9, fifth straight win over a local rival. Thumped them again. Love to see it. Shout out to my adopted team. I've decided to adopt Loveland. They beat Fossil Ridge last night, 17-14. Loveland just feels like they're more my energy than the Fort Collins High Schools, just being real. Yeah, I'm excited. It's great to have college ball back. It's great to have high school ball back as well. Finally, Chris says, since we added Dallas Baptist, will CSU finally get a baseball team, or is that not in the sports vision for the university? Not without a significant uptick in donations. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I had Weber and Parsons on the day that the Pac-12 announced, the Pac-12 news was announced last fall, and I asked them straight up, and the answer was no. So I don't expect it anytime soon. Shout out to everybody for rocking with us in the Toyota chat. Shout out to Paul McKee for joining the DNVR Supporters Club. Much love to everybody that is rocking with us week after week. We will be back Monday with another live show. I'm not going to do a late night post-game stream. It's going to be like 2 a.m. But I will have written content that comes out for you Sunday morning. I guess it's going to be Sunday morning by the time that game ends. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited for football season to be here. I'm excited for all the awesome content we're going to produce this season. Taylor says, play to win and expect to compete. That's the bare minimum. Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.